On October 1st of 1971, when the Magic Kingdom opened, there were very few attractions that were original to the park that were not clones of something that had already been done at Disneyland. One of those few things was the Country Bear Jamboree, which opened to huge crowds. Yeah, I know some of you at home are probably rolling your eyes saying, when did the Country Bears ever have huge crowds? Well, they did back then. In fact, the space next door to the Country Bear Jamboree, which eventually became a store, used to be the indoor extended queue, and it was not uncommon to see lines of guests outside the building waiting in the hot Florida sun to see the beloved bears. Of course, as time went on, the show maybe became a little less popular, as all new attractions do. But there were several updates through the years. In the 1980s, there was a Christmas version of the show that was introduced, and as well, a whole new version of the show that replaced the regular show in both Florida and California called the Vacation Hoedown. So, after all of that, then the original show came back to Florida. The other show remained in California until eventually in 2001, Disney took away the Country Bear Jamboree from California. Along the way, they did open in Japan as well, where all three of those shows would operate seasonally for many, many years. And in fact, as of this year, do once more. But at Walt Disney World, the show was starting to show its age. The animatronics were not looking great. The show had been cut down in length by several minutes, and the crowds were simply not materializing. So in the late 2010s, it was decided that maybe Disney should get rid of the Country Bear Jamboree. Now, I won't bore you with that story. I've told it a million times, and you know our involvement in it. We're not going down that road today. We're gonna keep this show as short as it can be, because you know I'm going to talk for a while about the Country Bears. But nonetheless, what happened was that idea didn't happen. Disney went back to the drawing board, and in fact, what they dug out, proving that great ideas never die, was an idea to update the show in Japan. The idea was to incorporate Disney IP, Disney music, from animated films and otherwise, into the Country Bear Jamboree. And while the Oriental Land Company never bought the show, the idea never died and eventually was resurrected for Walt Disney World, where it was finally announced a few years ago, and then just this year, in fact over the summer, we saw the debut of what is called the Country Bear Musical Jamboree, finally realizing that idea. You guys have asked many, many times. I sadly was not here in the United States when the show debuted. I was very sad to miss that debut, but I have, since returning from Japan, seen the show several times. I've been thinking about this a lot, and you have continued to ask. So here it is, my honest review of the Country Bear Musical Jamboree. Before we get started with this honest review, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, I am not wearing a Country Bear Jamboree shirt. I'm not even wearing a Country Bear Jamboree t-shirt. We are refilming this at a later date because we lost the original file. So bear with me here. Get it? Yeah, I want to apologize because I should be wearing a Country Bear shirt, but obviously, number one, I don't own a Country Bear button-up because no one's ever made one. So, I don't know. We did make this Tower of Terror button-up, so maybe, I don't know, should we make a Country Bear button-up? Let us know in the comments if you'd buy it, if we did one. Maybe it should be done. Maybe it needs to be put into existence. I would have worn, I have the shirt for this show, but it wouldn't, the beige wouldn't really go with this, so here we are. Anyway, but the rest of, obviously, the desk and such is decked out because we love our Country Bears here at WDWNT. You guys know the story. Again, I wasn't here when the show debuted, but I've seen it several times now, and I'm ready to talk about the Country Bear Musical Jamboree. So first things first, the exterior of the attraction, not a whole lot changed. They changed, a couple years ago, they added these sort of weird playbill things on the pillars outside the main entrance, and there were these ads with really small text, and I was like, I get it. Like someone asked them to add something to try to get more foot traffic in the door and explain a little bit more of what it is, because, you know, at Walt Disney World we have there is a curse and a blessing, and the curse is that we have the least knowledgeable guests in the world, right? We have the most pure tourists, and I think sort of the least repeat traffic of any of the other Disney parks in the world. The rest of them seem to have a really, really big, sizable local market, which is in most cases a majority of their business. Now, how much of the majority of their business the locals are changes from resort to resort, but generally, Walt Disney World has the most tourists, the least amount of repeat guests, I would say, of any of the Disney resorts in the world, probably. So, because of that, the Country Bear Jamboree has had a very hard time for a long time getting people through the doors, right? We've seen this problem at a lot of any of the theaters at Magic Kingdom, right? We've seen this at Carousel of Progress, we've seen this at Tiki Room, and there's been this fight over the 50 years that the park has existed for those shows to continue to exist, right? We lost the original Tiki Room show, for the most part, back in, 1997? And in 98, we got Under New Management, which was a show a lot of people did not like. And then, of course, Iago, the animatronic in that show, caught fire, and they brought back a version of the original Tropical Serenade as Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room. For Carousel of Progress, that show had seen updates. Obviously, when it moved to Walt Disney World in 1975, we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of that in January. When it moved in 75, they got rid of, imagine this. If you think some changes at the Disney parks are sacrilegious, or sacrilege, the Carousel Progress theme, Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow, wasn't in the show for a long time. From 1975 until the 1990s, that song was gone. And in its place was Now Is the Best Time. And of course, but they had that update in 93, 94. And it's been the same since, if you haven't been able to tell. For the Country Bears, changes came earlier than any of those. So in 1986, they decided to do the Vacation Show, which was a permanent replacement in Florida and California. So the original show didn't exist in Florida from 86 to 91, came back in 91 and remained, albeit, for many years replaced in the Christmas season by the Christmas show, remained from 91 all the way up until, when was that, when did the Country Bears, I've been gone a lot, I don't remember, was that January of this year that old Country Bears closed? This year's it's been a rough year for me. I have not been here a lot, and so I don't remember. I think it was January this year, yeah, that sounds right. January 20, it was January, yeah. Sorry, I'm losing it. So in January, finally we lost the original show, and chances are it's not going to come back. So this is a big deal. The show existed for 50-something years. It almost didn't, but it existed for almost all of 50-something years. Call back to the opening day of Walt Disney World, October 1st of 71. Obviously a big deal, they're gonna replace this show. As we talked about before, this show was originally going to be made for Japan. They didn't get it, and then when the Toy Story show was canceled, they picked this back up. Now, the first thing I want to say is they I think paid a lot more respect to the original show than maybe the first concepts for Country Bear Musical Jamboree would have. So very vividly, I remember seeing the concept art for the what would have been the Tokyo show, and Buff, Melvin, and Max are on the wall, and they're wearing. Again, it's all a celebration of Disney, right? So Buff, Melvin, and Max, one of them had mouse ears on, another one had like that mini princess cone hat, and I forget what the other one was wearing. But then like Big Al was still doing Remember Me, but above him was those hand-cut paper banners like in Coco. And he was wearing like the Mexican hat with the little hanging, someone in the comments will tell me the names of all these things. He had the little Mexican hat with the little hanging pieces and all of that. So all of the performers were more dressed to fit the show, and in many cases, more specifically, what musical number they would be performing. In the original plans for this show. Now, when it was readjusted for Walt Disney World, obviously in 2019 they turned the project back on, but then COVID happened in March of 2020, and a lot of the people working on this show ended up no longer being with the Walt Disney Company, to put it in a nice way. And then after COVID, the show eventually got turned back on, and it seems some creative changes were made at that point. I'm very happy with that change, because I think Walt Disney World being the original home of the show, it would have, and this replacing in full the original show, it would have been a bit much to have the bears in like Disney attire. I don't think we're there. That being said, if you've seen Vacation Jamboree, they had at it, man. Like Henry's in a shirt from a camp he used to go to that doesn't fit, so his stomach is sticking out, and it's very cartoony, and Big Al's a miner, and there's all sorts of anarchy happening. I mean, in the Christmas show, Big Al was Baby New Year. He wore a giant diaper. So they're comedy characters. They're going to be off the wall, right? And so that being said, they could have gone that direction. They didn't, and I think that worked really well here. But either way, I got way off. I think I got way off base. I think I was talking about the ads outside the theater at first, and I just went on a tangent. But yeah, so those ads didn't really work, and I like now that they have like the fake reviews and stuff. They tell more of a story. They don't necessarily draw people in, but they tell more of a story. Now, as for the name change to Country Bear Musical Jamboree, you might be like, well, that's a weird name. That is an attempt to explain to guests what is in the building. Because I think people saw Country Bear Jamboree and they walk up to the entrances. Is this a ride? Is this a ride? That's such a common thing. You ever see people stand outside, we have very little time to still do this. Stand outside a dinosaur and just watch the questions. Listen to the questions people ask outside of Dinosaur. Where, is this a roller coaster? Is this a ride? Does it go upside down? They're like, no, it's a ride in a Jeep. But does it go upside down? It's a ride in, no, you bounce around in a Jeep. But what do you mean? You ride around in a Jeep. People have a lot of questions as to what things are. And Country Bear Jamboree, for some reason, did not resonate with people. That name didn't explain to them what it might be. Adding musical indicates that you're going to see a musical show, right? So I think maybe it'll help, probably not. People leave their brains at home. People will probably still walk up to the poor cast members outside this attraction and ask, what is this? Going further and explaining what it is, the lobby now does a much better job of that. The first time I went to Japan in 2018, I was blown away by the lobby area. Now, I never saw Country Bears in California, so I don't know offhand what exactly was in their lobby, because they had 2 theaters as well. Japan still has the 2 theaters, and they fill them. So in the lobby in Japan are a number of pieces that continue to tell the story. Obviously, those Mark Davis portraits, the famous oval portraits, are there. But in between them were a number of things they added later, photographs of the bears doing various activities that would change throughout the season, because they run 3 shows in Japan, right? They run the regular show, and then summer to fall they run Vacation, and November to January they run the Christmas show, the Jingle Bell Jamboree. The pictures in the lobby actually change for those 2 shows, and they're fantastic. But otherwise, there are cases with artifacts and little displays with propping that are meant to tell you more of the story of who the Country Bears are, and establish that they are very famous musical bears who have traveled the world. They are famous performers. All of that story is established in the propping, right? So there's like a case with what you'd call historical things. It's like, where they first wrote down what the songs would be, and the first scratching or etching of Come Again on a piece of wood, and things of that sort. So we replicated that in a way for the Florida attraction. So now you have a number of very fun props. There are a ton of Easter eggs here, and we will, I think, do a separate Easter egg video at another time. The cool thing for me is tying into the full lore of the Country Bears. So now we live in an age where people love these, connected universes and lore, and that definitely ties to Disney parks. The internet has allowed that kind of fandom to blossom and grow. People share fun facts and backstories and history. And what's great now is the Country Bears play into that, in that we are in a universe where all the shows have existed. So we are acknowledging that the Christmas show and the Vacation show are essentially canon in the Country Bear universe, the CBU. If you will. And there's a lot of connective tissue here. We have the guitar for Mr. McGraw, formerly Liver Lips, now Romeo, because not only in the show do we bring back the Elvis impersonator kind of persona of McGraw, but we are referencing that existed before, because it did. It was in both the Christmas show and Vacation. We have a reference to the Vacation show in Wendell's camera. Wendell very famously shows slides in the Vacation show, but also gets yelled at, quote unquote yelled at, by a cast member in the Vacation show for taking flash photography. But the camera, which is reminiscent of the one he had in Vacation show, is there, and there's photographs, and it indicates that Wendell likes to take photographs. That's his thing. It's one of his hobbies. And then throughout we have like the artifacts case, right? We have like the laying tracks light up sign, which is very cute. We have awards. We have, again, that come again, the music sheet scratched on a piece of wood. It's not verbatim the one from Japan, but it looks a lot like it. My favorite is them writing out what they would put in the show on the Hungry Bear restaurant napkin. Hungry Bear restaurant exists in 2 parks in the world. Of course, at Disneyland, where it was next door to the Country Bear Jamboree and the Country Bear Playhouse in Bear Country, which eventually became Critter Country and now will become Bayou Country. That restaurant, funny enough, will no longer be the Hungry Bear. It's going to be the Country Bear Barbecue Jamboree. Or the Hungry Bear Barbecue Jamboree. I'm sorry, I'm mixing all of them up. It's the Hungry Bear Barbecue Jamboree. So it'll still be Hungry Bear, but not restaurant, Barbecue Jamboree, with a lot more Country Bear story and lore and such. But it'll open in November, and we will definitely be there for that. I'm very excited. But there is a napkin where very famously, musicians will, they go eat while they're on tour after a show or whatever, and they write down ideas on a napkin, because that's what's available. So I love little stuff like that. There's a lot of other fun stuff. I think there's a case that is, there's some fan mail in a case. There's a pile of letters, which I tend to think is a reference to all the people who sent mail to Magic Kingdom and Disney World management telling them they could not remove the Country Bear Jamboree. I don't know for a fact that's what it is, but for me, I teared up because I felt it was an homage to that whole ordeal. But I love it also because the postmark on the letters are tributes to all 3 Country Bear attractions that have existed. So there is a 1971 Frontierland, there is a 1972 Bear Country for Disneyland, and then for Tokyo, there is a 1983 Westernland. Hungry Bear Restaurant still exists in Tokyo, home of my beloved curry. It's very, very good. Please go eat there. Although I think the napkins are probably more a reference to the California one. But yeah, the fan mail is there, and there's like a little, there's a letter a kid wrote out in crayon and some art he drew for Teddy Barra. It's very, very cute. Barry Poppins album in there, the magazine covers. Spend some time. If the show's about to load and you haven't been there yet, spend some time and go look at the lobby. They did a beautiful job. And also, in between that and all the original art that was there, they've placed some Mark Davis concept art for bears that didn't make it to the show, which is wonderful. Love it. But then the other thing that happens is there are announcements which establish more of the lore. I believe it's Henry doing the pre-show announcement. They tell you, oh, it's so many minutes till the show's open. And there's not a bad seat in the house except for in the lobby, and so on and so forth. But again, establishing more of the lore and the character of who the bears are. Then we get to the actual show. And the first thing that's interesting is they've removed the speaking role of the cast members. So cast members used to go to the little box in the front, and they'd open it, and they'd pull out the microphone and welcome to Grizzly Hall, folks. And they do a bear pun or two. And no eating, drinking, or smoking. You can take all the photos and video you want, just make sure the lights aren't on, blah, blah, blah. Now they allow, for the sake of show consistency, they have Buff, Melvin, and Max coming to life immediately once you enter the theater and giving you all that information. It's a shame because I think the cast members that work at Grizzly Hall have always been great. There are other attractions where I've had some issues understanding, and I know other guests have issues understanding what people were saying. I'm not looking at you, Muppet Vision, but over the years, I've definitely had some cast members do the speaking role at Muppet Vision, and you couldn't understand what they told the guests to do. I had no idea what they said. So Never was a problem at Grizzly Hall, but I understand that they're, they try to, in most cases, they've taken more and more speaking roles away from cast members over the years. So then we get into the show, and Henry is still our master of ceremonies, and he kicks off the show with Gomer on the piano, and we bring out the 5 bear rugs. Now, we did not keep, my friend Josh, who is probably just about the biggest country bear fan there is, along with myself, we had a discussion about this, because I wanted to pick his brain a little bit and see what he felt about the show. And he did not like this opening number, the Country Bear Musical Jamboree introduction number, because if they could have kept 2 songs, right, there are 2 songs that are pretty unproblematic. One of them is, the 5 bear rugs and the bear band serenade, right? That could have been kept. There was nothing wrong with that. But they chose to switch the songs because, in story, I like it because the Bears sat down and they decided, well, we're going to do a whole new show, so we're going to change all of this. Now, in real world, that is a very iconic piece of music, and it's original music from the first show, which one of the things I saw a lot of younger fans going on and on about when the show was closing, the old show, was the loss of all these original songs. A lot of those songs were not original. They were covers of old songs. Don't feel bad, because even, I'm the oldest man on Disney YouTube, but even in my lifetime, those songs were not well known. So that only comes from years of research and learning to realize that those were real songs. They were not songs that were relevant in my lifetime. But there were a couple of original songs, Bear Band Serenade being one of them. But that is gone now. I like the Country Bear Musical Jamboree song. I understand Josh's point about it too. I don't really disagree with him, but I'm also okay with the change because I think it's a catchy song and it works. And I think we've established enough lore out in the lobby with the announcements and the propping and all of that. That being said, if you walk in and the show loads immediately, you're going to miss all of that. So it's not physically in the show anymore. But it's more, takes place before the show in a number of ways. But I think it's a cute song. It works really well, and we're off. So our first musical number from the supporting cast is going to be Try Everything, which is Bunny, Bubbles, and Beulah, and as well Trixie. When this was announced, I was happy because it meant the Country Bears were going to get to stay. I know people were at Destination D23 or whatever it was called, that event, when this was announced. People were in an uproar, and people were waiting for my review, and they're like, he's going to be so mad they're changing the Country Bears. And I came out and said, this was before we were back on the media list, by the way. People that say we're shills now. Way before that, I thought it was a very positive series of announcements, and one of them being that the Bears would stay, but get an updated show. They'd be shown love, and that's fine with me, again, because you have to remember, when I was a kid, we still had the Vacation show. So I've grown up with a number of different Country Bear shows. It is not sacrilege to change the show for them to perform different songs. Obviously, a show could be better or worse, but the idea of making a new Bear show is not a bad idea. It would depend on execution. And so I was okay with the idea. I was very excited to at least see what they would do. But then we got real close to the opening, and finally they shared a preview of what the Try Everything number would be, and that it would be Trixie. I became worried because the song Try Everything is about, keep trying things until you succeed. And so the idea is Trixie would be trying a number of things until she finds her calling. But it would make, in a lot of cases, I was worried, are they going to make her a sympathetic character? Which that made me worried, because I was like, look, the Country Bears has to be a funny show. And the comedy comes from Henry's the straight man, right? And the rest of them, for the most part, are either kind of dumb or ridiculous. They're ridiculous characters. They're all kind of crazy. And the comedy comes from Henry trying to keep the show going. Henry and a couple of talented musicians are anchored by a cast of, Island of Misfit Toys cast of bears that they've found and perform with them. And Trixie was one of those, right? And so my concern became, we're going to make her sympathetic, like, oh, look, she's trying things and she's not making it, and oh, yeah, but that. But then in the end, she succeeded because she kept trying. And I just, at that point, I was like, oh no. If you take away the silliness of the bears, the show will not work. It won't work. And so I was very nervous those 2 or 3 weeks before the show. And then I unfortunately had to spoil it for myself because they needed some social media help and stuff on opening day. I was in Japan, but the timing worked out, and I was up in the morning, or up in the evening, I guess it was evening, and I helped them out get the TikTok and stuff out. And so I saw a good amount of the show, which is not usually something I do. I usually am there on the opening day for things and to form an opinion from physically seeing the attractions. I didn't get to do that this time. But I didn't see the whole thing, but I saw enough. And the number, obviously it's pretty early in the show, so I saw the Trixie number in full, and I was very pleasantly surprised that there's a good amount of comedy. Like, yeah, they do make her kind of a sympathetic character, but at the same time, there's still comedy. Like, she's trying a number of things where the results are hilarious. Like, she's what's the word? She's out of her depth, is that the term? She's not figuring out how to do these things. And comical results are happening. So she's still kind of playing fish out of water, and I like that. That works really well. And then it's cute. You get to the end, like, you've played her off as, kind of incapable at a number of things. And then finally at the end, she finds, I think it's a state or county fair, and she performs, and she's found her talent, which is singing, which is obvious because the artist they had perform as Trixie, stellar vocals. And throughout, the other thing I was worried about was wrong-sounding bears, right? There's a somewhat off-color joke from Family Guy I sometimes reference in these cases, which is, I think they say, Jim Henson had a wait-and-see approach, and now we have wrong-sounding Muppets. And they cut to the Muppets, and like Kermit the Frog has like a really, or Fozzie, someone has a really deep, Fozzie has a really deep voice, and it doesn't sound like him. And it's, in some cases, yeah, like current Kermit the Frog, I'm like, I don't know about this. And there's one particular case in recent memory where Disney messed with a classic attraction and I think really botched it. And that's Pirates of the Caribbean. And it's the auction scene. Not only do I think what they rewrote is, it's not cute, it's not charming, it's not funny, it's low brand, it's low quality humor, it's awful. That scene is horrendous. It does not work. But the thing that killed that scene most of all for me was the voice of the auctioneer. Because it sounds very rehearsed, and it almost sounds like an announcer voice, and it sounds like someone trying to be a pirate as opposed to the original vocals, which I think sounded correct. And it sounds produced, and it's higher quality. You could hear it's higher quality than all the old pirate voices around him, which I think they did a really good job in 2006, right? When they went in there and did the Jack Sparrow updates, they did a really good job sound mixing, because I don't think the voices stood out that much. Maybe the guy dunking the mare in the well a little bit, but otherwise it worked. It worked well enough. Then when they went in and did the redhead scene, that auctioneer voice is terrible. I mean, Red's bad Irish accent is a whole nother story. But the auctioneer sounds awful. And so I was very worried going into this that we were gonna have some bears that sounded wrong. I think they did as good of a job casting this as was possible. At no point in the show do I sit there and go, that doesn't sound anything like that character should sound. Buff, Melvin, and Max sound correct. Henry sounds correct. Again, they're not exact, but they feel right, and that's the most important thing. And in Trixie's case, like the vocal, it's a big vocal, and she's a big girl, and it sounds right. It sounds correct to me. But beyond that, the vocal talent and the musical talent is superb. They did a great job. It is wonderful that you can go on the internet and Apple or Spotify or whatever and go download. They recorded these songs in full. One of my negatives about this show is it's too short. And what irks me a little bit is that you have the full tracks, but because they believe, the general belief is the amount of time guests will sit and watch an animatronic show is 11 or 12 minutes. That's what Tiki Room got cut down to back in 2011. That's what they cut Bears down to, I think, a year or so later, the last version of Country Bear Jamboree that performed. And that's around the time that this show lasts. They believe guests will not sit for longer, or it's an hourly capacity thing where they just want to keep churning people. Or maybe it's about the time people will wait outside too, right? Because if they come into the lobby and it's like, well, people, if they see an 11 out there, will come in, but anything longer and for a musical show, they're not going to wait. So either way, it feels short. And what kills me is they recorded these songs in full. Go listen to them. They're phenomenal. They're all great covers, but they all still feel country western. Again, I'm not a music expert. I'm sure there's other genre names and things at play here. But they all sound correct for the Country Bears if they were going to cover these songs. And beyond that, they're just really good covers. They're all really fun to listen to. I like them a lot. So it's great that they have them in full. It's a shame that you get to hear very little of that in the actual attraction. And it all sounds great because they redid the sound system, and long overdue. The sound system is phenomenal. The animatronic, I cried the first time I saw this. Not because of what the Bears are performing, but because to see them alive, like to see the Country Bears move and be alive in the way that the animatronics in Fantasy Springs or Tiana's Bayou Adventure are, it warmed my heart. Like I love the amount of love and affection and care that were shown to Mark Davis's characters, and these characters that we've had 50 years to fall in love with, made me cry. It's a beautiful thing to see them loved. But yeah, vocals, phenomenal. Music, phenomenal. Everything, sound-wise, phenomenal in this show. But yeah, so you still kept Trixie as a comedy character, which is great. The thing I don't like are these, there's two what I call combined numbers, right? In order to keep the show short, a couple of bears lost their solos. So Bunny, Bubbles, and Beulah used to, solo, they're a trio. You know what I'm saying. The three of them used to perform without any accompaniment. Now they have been wedged in a musical number with Trixie, so they don't get a moment to themselves. They share that with Trixie, and they're essentially the background vocals for her, which is sad. It's great, the song, but it's sad that they don't get a moment to shine on their own anymore. And the other moment later is Wendell and Teddy Barra, we'll talk about in a few moments. That I didn't care for. I understand they had to hit a certain time, and they did their best to do that, and they did. The other thing to talk about is Buff, Melvin, and Max have an increased role in the show. This will feel a little out of character if your only experience with the Bears is Country Bear Jamboree. If you experience the Christmas or vacation shows, the three heads on the wall had a bigger role. They sang background vocals, they played in the show a little bit more, had a little more dialogue. And this is a callback to that. And I love that they play a bigger role because for me, that was my thing as a kid. That's the reason I fell in love with Country Bears as a kid. I was infatuated with these three animal heads on the wall. These stuffed heads just started coming to life and talking to me. I mean, I love Tiki Room. My things as a kid, Tiki Room was my favorite. And it was the fact that this whole room, you go into this room and then suddenly these things that you didn't think would do anything came to life. As a kid, that's amazing. And I think it was amazing for people in the 60s and 70s who had never seen animatronics before. So I've always loved them. I used to always want to sit underneath them and watch them. And the other cool thing when I was a kid was the mile-long bar was outside. So when you would exit the Country Bear Jamboree, the start of Pecos Bill's used to be the mile-long bar, which was a bar that then had a mirror up against the bar, so it looked like the bar kept going for a very long time, thus mile-long. But there was a second set of animatronic heads that as you left the Country Bears, you could see at the mile-long bar. My parents would have to go grab a seat, and I would just stand there probably for hours and watch Buff, Melvin, and Max go. And so I love them, and so the fact that they're a bigger part of the show makes me very happy. It's a selfish thing, but I also think it works. I think it works really well. The character that has returned that is a callback to the two seasonal shows is Rufus. Rufus is supposed to be up in the back somewhere working the spotlight. Rufus does not exist in the original Country Bear Jamboree, but he existed in the other two working the spot. And he's mentioned a couple times and you hear him do stuff. He's referenced in this show, so he exists once again, which I love. It's great that he's back. Again, all of the lore, all three shows exist in this, in the CBU now. As I said earlier, no more Liver Lips McGraw. The term Liver Lips is, it's essentially a racial slur, I believe. And so they've changed it to Romeo McGraw, which plays into the fact that he has been an Elvis impersonator in the past. And so he's playing, since he's Romeo, he sings Kiss the Girl from The Little Mermaid. I love this. Buff Melvin and Max on background vocals, tremendous. It's a great cover. The lighting shines in this moment. Again, they replaced all the lighting in Grizzly Hall. It's beautiful to see Grizzly Hall look like a modern Disney theme park facility with all the bells and whistles that they all have. Finally, to get the money to do this to this attraction. You see the money that was rubbed all over this building. But I think he looks great. Love the number. Perfect. You have Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious from, that's from Ernest the Dude, which is, I think, the bear that the least amount of people have ever known the name of, but now they actually mention him, which is great. He's on his fiddle, and we establish in the queue, we have like a busted fiddle that he's worn out because he fiddles so fast. And you get to see that actually happen here. So this is something, this carried through. This was an idea from the first concepts of the show through to the final vision, that this was going to be in there. I love he's dressed in the Bert outfit, the Jolly Holiday outfit. He looks very cute. And this is, I don't know if this is known. What I had been told was the original concept was when he played the fiddle, obviously it smokes because he's fiddling so fast. What the smoke was supposed to do in the original plan was he fiddled so hard that the smoke filled the entire Grizzly Hall. So you're sitting in like a cloud of smoke, which then the smoke would start to clear, and obviously smoke looks like clouds, and that sets up the next number, which is Whole New World with Wendell and Teddy Barra. That didn't get to happen. I don't know if they decided it was too much to fill, like it would have caused damage to the seats or whatever the case may have been. They decided not to have the smoke fill the whole theater, but that's why those two were in that order, is one was supposed to transition really nicely into the next, and now it does not. That didn't happen. But this is a great cover. It's very cute because she's up above and she's swinging, and it's, I mean, obviously the usual song is a duet, and it is a duet here, and you have Gomer on the piano. Another nitpicky thing I don't like about this show is whatever they did to Teddy Barra's flower. So the big flower opens she comes down and the petals open, right? The underneath of the petals used to be this textured material. It looked nice. Now it's very clearly this flat like vinyl, and it looks terrible. And every time this song starts, I see it and I get angry about it. And I know they're like, oh, this'll endure better, this'll last longer, but it looks bad. It looks cheap. I don't think it looks good. So it makes me sad. Because I always loved that. I mean, it's this big flower in the ceiling. It's this pretty cool moment when that opens and she's swinging. I mean, beyond the fact that an animatronic is swinging on a swing, which still continues to be a wow moment after all these years. It bothers me how cheap that material looks. So on paper, if you had told me they're going to have a song from Frozen in here, I would have been like, why are they doing Let It Go? Who's singing Let It Go? Why is it Big Al? And I think it would have ruined the show. I think it would have killed the show. And then I would have looked at the paper and saw Fixer Upper and been like, that's weird. What are you going to do with that? And so Fixer Upper ends up being the number for Shaker, who they say is an eligible bachelor. So again, we're still playing them off as lovable losers. I think that's the best way to describe them. They're lovable losers, and Shaker is one of those. And again, this plays off of the lore because Shaker very famously has a love affair with an octopus. That's why people are talking about, they're like, oh, Disney's going to ruin this show. The integrity of the show, of the Country Bears, will be ruined when they change it. And I'm sitting here going, Shaker had a love affair with an octopus.
named Dolores, who's wrapped around him, and it tells her it's not working out. But anyway, again, we play into him being an eligible bachelor here. And it's because he's a bit of a fixer-upper. What's great is the homage. They say, I think this is the part, or was it, I'm not watching the show live with you, but I think Ernest the Dude is the one they say played with the Mineral Kings. That's a reference to Mineral King, which was the ski resort where Mark Davis drew up the show for that resort. Mineral King was going to be a ski resort, and they wanted something for nighttime entertainment. An animatronic country bear show was the answer. Obviously, Mineral King never happened, and they simply slotted the country bear show in for the opening of Walt Disney World. But I think that's for Ernest, not for this part. But the reason that came to mind is the homage here is Shaker's outfit is meant to be that of, from the Golden Horseshoe at Disneyland, Wally Bogue. This is an homage to the classic outfit of Mr. Wally Bogue, and it's a loving tribute. I think it's fantastic. Shaker also looks good in it. It looks right. But I love, he gets to still do his shaking at the end. He shakes back and forth. A great choice. Again, on paper, I would have said not in a million years, and in execution, I think it turned out as good as it could. Then the curtains open on Big Al, and we get the laugh from Remember Me. This is, if I was going to pick something from the Disney song catalog for him, this is obviously the right choice. It strikes a chord with people, no pun intended. Again, in talking to my friend Josh, he was not a fan of this. And I get that because Blood on the Saddle is, again, one of those songs that, other than the fact that it's about blood, it's not really an offensive song. Look, Mama Don't Whoop Little Buford, we knew we were going to lose. We were shocked in 2012 that we didn't lose Mama Don't Whoop Little Buford, shoot him instead. But we live in the country we live in where there is, gun violence, and it's in many cases connected to schools. And are we going to keep a musical number? Like, how do we, look, I love that number with all of my heart. It came from a simpler time. And unfortunately, that simpler time is gone, and you're going to have people that aren't you and me that haven't seen this show a million times and understand that, yeah, that's from a different time. People are going to come in there and be like, it's about, you should shoot your child? Like, what is this show talking about? So I get that song being gone. Blood on the Saddle could have stayed. And I think I would have met Josh halfway. So my thing would have been, okay, he sings Remember Me, and at some point it's too sad, I can't go on. Josh didn't like that makes Big Al look kind of stupid. He can't even get through a song, but he also plays pretty somber in again the Vacation show and Christmas or more Vacation show. He's kind of crying a little bit. So we're playing back into that here. So if he couldn't get through Remember Me, I think what would have been fun is at the end, even if just for a moment, when he comes back in at the end, then he could have done. He's like, oh, okay, then I'm just going to go. That was too sad. I'm going to go back to playing my more famous song, which is Blood on the... And even if we get 3 lines of it real quick, just that is one change I would have made, and I don't think anyone would have been upset about it. But also knowing a little more, supposedly a big part of why this got greenlit was royalties. Disney apparently paid royalties on many of the songs in the old Country Bear. So in fighting to get this project greenlit, one of the ways it was sold to management was, you don't have to pay royalties anymore. I hit the mug. You don't have to pay royalties anymore because we own the music. And so they don't own Blood on the Saddle. It's a real song, which, by the way, was performed by Tex Ritter, who was John Ritter's father. If you didn't know that, John Ritter from Three's Company and Ain't Simple Rules, and God rest his soul, very funny man. His father was the one who sang Blood on the Saddle. Fun fact. I would have liked that homage, and I don't know if the royalties on Blood on the Saddle could have been that bad, but in classic Disney fashion, the penny pinching comes into play from time to time. And I totally believe that story, that that they've said, there's no royalties. They're like, all right, approved, go ahead, go for it. But yeah, I get Josh's argument. I kind of half agree. Remember Me gets a huge laugh, though, so I think that works. But I would have liked him to come back with Blood on the Saddle. Then we have Henry gets to perform You've Got a Friend in Me from Toy Story. Some people joked with me. They're like, oh, it's got to be an homage to the Toy Story marionette show that was canceled. I don't think it is. I think that is a song that's in a country western style. I think it made sense. It's also very cute that Henry and Sammy sing it. So Sammy's not in his hat because Henry doesn't have his tall hat anymore. He has like the cowboy hat, little like a Stetson. I don't know. Not my area of expertise. But so it's cute. So out from behind the little speaker, Henry or Sammy pops up, and Sammy and Henry, they're good friends, and it's cute, and they sing "You've Got a Friend in Me" with each other, and I love it. It's a great cover. It's adorable, and the fact that Sammy gets to live on, I love. I don't think it's an homage. I think it just made sense. It might be, but I think it made perfect sense in the show, and it works well. So here's the only song I have a problem with is the final number, which is Bare Necessities. It's not for the choice, right? Bare Necessities is referenced in the original Country Bear Jamboree. There is a joke made. Gather up all your bare necessities, right? Or whatever it is. But it's in the original show. So it made sense to have it in this one. The rendition, the cover in this show is a little too slow for me. I think because all the other shows end on some fast-paced big number with all the bears coming back in. They all come back in this one, but the tempo's kind of slow, and it doesn't feel as full musically, the music doesn't feel as full, so it's not this big finale, right? Like, It's a Small World. When all the speakers don't work in that finale room and you don't get the big orchestra in there, it doesn't feel like the big proper finale of a boat ride around the world. And in Country Bears, when you don't have this big, full, fast-paced number, the energy is not there for it to be the final number. So it makes me kind of sad. I was like, that's kind of a letdown of an ending. Totally get the choice. It's a good cover. I just don't think it works as the final song. That's my one big gripe with this attraction. Nonetheless, it happens, and we get Big Al coming back out, and he sings Remember Me a little more, which had to happen. But throughout, there are so many lines that are references to the original show, lines that were carried over, jokes that carried over, etc. We lost some, right? As soon as I find a ladder, I'll be right up is no more. Henry, you're no longer allowed to hit on a woman. You can't do that, even if very playfully and, not in an offensive manner. Henry, you're not allowed. The other thing we don't get is in the final song, Come Again, we don't get, don't forget to gather your belongings and your husband too. It's now, and your children too, which I get because not everyone has a husband, right? So yeah, the joke worked. The joke is the same, right? The changing from husband to children doesn't change the joke. I'm fine with that. I do miss that we don't have the ladder joke. That's the other little thing I would have liked in the show. But Come Again, which was an original song made for the Country Bears, I am so glad they kept this. So this is the one song they kept. It's my favorite. I love it. Again, probably because it played into, the Three Talking Heads, which is my thing. But I love that it's there. It's a great cover of it. And you exit out the theater. So if you can't tell, I've been very positive. I have a couple of nitpicks, which with any attraction in the world, even the best ones I've been on, there are a couple things I would do differently. But it's not my place, right? I don't create these things. But for the most part, I have very few problems with Country Bear Musical Jamboree. And I think they did almost as good of a job as you could have possibly done given the task. This was a tall order. They knew after the hoopla in 2019 that people were going to be out for them on this project. And I think, I like Tiana's Bayou Adventure. I think they did a good job. But I think, honestly, given, the 50 years of history they had to lovingly pay tribute to while still incorporating IP and Disney music, I think the Country Bear Musical Jamboree team did a better job than the Bayou Adventure team. They both did good work. I think they did an amazing job given what was tasked to them, which was, okay, you're going to replace the original Country Bear show and you're going to put Disney music in there. And it's like, and we're going to do it at the original in Florida. That's a tall order. I think, again, seeing the restoration and upgrade of Grizzly Hall, completely rebuilt animatronics, like Buff, Melvin, and Max don't click anymore. The clicking noises are gone. You'll now have to explain to future generations about the clicking noises because it's no longer a thing. They all look beautiful. The lighting and the sound, phenomenal. The voice actors sound right. The musical performances are perfect. Tremendously talented musicians involved. Art direction. Kevin and Jody did some art for this, and they did a tremendous job. I love the costumes are great, right? They feel like respectful costume changes. But most of all, it all works because the characters feel like the characters. The bears feel like the characters they have always been. Even if changed for some political correctness, the characters still feel like they're the same bears that were there when the attraction closed, and you came in today and they're performing a different set of music. It worked. As opposed to Tiki Room, which, look, I liked under new management. I thought the jokes were funny, but that's, as a fanboy, the jokes, we've been doing the same show since 1963. Like, oh, that's funny. That's when the show debuted at Disneyland. Oh, that's funny. It's an old act. I get it. And this act is old and tired and blah, blah. I get the comedy there. But at the same time, Jose and Fritz and Michael and Pierre kind of still weren't themselves. In some cases, they were a little weird. In this case, we got a tasteful update that allows those characters to continue to live on, and the lore grows, right? There are now 4 shows of lore to grow from. We're getting a new restaurant. They're lightly theming a restaurant at Disneyland to continue to build upon the lore of the bears. They are going to continue to be a part of Disney parks around the world, which is wonderful. It is inevitable that Tokyo Disney's going to get this show. So if I were you, I'm definitely going to do this. If I were you, I'd go get your goodbyes in Japan. If you've had that bucket list trip planned for a while, same with Splash Mountain. If you had that bucket list trip planned for a while, I would plan to try and be there sooner rather than later, whether it's to see the original show uncut or to see one last time the vacation show or the Christmas show, because I don't know if they're even going to keep the seasonals in Japan, if and when this happens. But I just want to warn people. But nonetheless, I think in Florida, it fits perfectly. It will speak to new generations, and I think it is so important that this be relevant to future generations. It gives us... It extends the life of the characters indefinitely, keeping them relevant. And the beautiful thing is, I talked earlier about living in the internet age of this fandom, and that sometimes also being a blessing and a curse, right? The blessing of it is, what's going to happen here is you're going to allow a new young audience, they're going to walk in and not sit there and be confused as to what the hell is going on up there, why Buford's getting shot and what blood on the saddle. Like, as much as I love that show and I will miss it dearly, they're not going to have that confusion about what the hell this show is. And so now they're going to be, I like those songs. Oh, that was so cute. I love that. That was great. And it was funny. That's the other thing that's important is it's legitimately funny. The jokes are good. The comedy is still there and it's still as strong as it was before. But what's great is these people are going to fall in love with this show, and they are going to go down that same rabbit hole that you and I did. The rabbit hole that led me to find out that John Ritter's father performed Blood on the Saddle. That rabbit hole for them is going to be, oh, wait, what? There were other Country Bear shows? There was this one that performed for almost 50 years, and they're going to watch it, and that's going to become like their Horizons. I know there's a generation of you who missed the original Figment and Horizons, and you watched it on YouTube, Martin's Vids or whatever, and that became a thing for you because it's, oh, that's so cool. I wish I could have seen that thing. And it's preserved for future generations. That history is preserved and gets to be admired, right? But Figment still kind of exists, but what separates Country Bear Musical Jamboree from Journey into Imagination with Figment is the bears are still the bears. That a kind of annoying Figment is not Figment. The Figment I grew up with was he had this childlike awe and wonder. And that's what made him, it was him discovering his imagination, and that was so endearing. He was like this fun little kid going through the ride with you, discovering all these things alongside you. And you got to watch him learn about all these things he could imagine and how powerful the imagination is. As opposed to now where he's kind of like just pissing off Eric Idle. Like that's just his job. He's like, I don't like this guy. He threw my friend the Dreamfinder out, so I'm gonna destroy this place. That's not who Figment is. That's not who he is, right? So I love that Figment is alive. I love that he exists still, but it's not my Figment, right? These are my bears. My bears exist. They're just playing different songs, but it's them. But the cool thing is people are going to go down that rabbit hole while they get to enjoy a show where the bears live on as the bears. They are going to go down that rabbit hole you went down with Horizons or Figment or whatever it may be that you went down that rabbit hole with. They at some point are going to go on the internet and go looking for these things and discover the lore and these shows. And what's great is 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now, when it's time to update this show again, there might be a whole new generation of people with reverence for the original show. And maybe, who knows? Who knows what the future at that point looks like for Disney parks? But it could be a future where they're like, over the years, we've seen people still bring up that old show a lot. And maybe Disney could just buy the rights to the songs at that point, or they'll license them. And maybe Blood on the Saddle comes back at that point. Maybe the Bear Band Serenade, because it's not offensive really in any way. Maybe they decide, we own that song anyway. Let's work that back in. When we switch out a couple of these other songs, we'll work that one back in, right? I think by letting a new generation love and admire the show, we allow it the opportunity to continue to grow with people and continue to be passed down generation to generation. Now, obviously at Disneyland, things get passed down from generation to generation without the need for them to really, really, really be updated. So Tiki Room at Disneyland continues to be passed down generation to generation, but that works there because it's a local audience and people explain it to their kids at a young age and it's passed down. Not everyone that sees the Country Bears at Walt Disney World is passing it down. So it has to continue to be relevant in some way to the next group of guests. And so this relevance is important to keep the story going. We almost lost the Bears, but we didn't, and now they get to live on. And I am sure that whatever part of the Country Bear Jamboree you miss, the parts that somehow didn't get an homage in musical Jamboree, will live on somewhere at some point. But what's most important is that Mark's characters, let's not forget the most important thing is not only that there was very little original to Walt Disney World when it opened, other than the fact that Roy was like, oh yeah, my brother wanted not just a show about Abraham Lincoln, he wanted all the presidents on stage, so we'll do that. And oh yeah, we'll do a Mickey Mouse animatronic show. Beyond that, there was very little original to Disney World. The thing that was the most original, completely from start to finish, that was the most unique to the vacation kingdom of the world, was the Country Bears. Outside of the hotels, the Polynesian, the Contemporary, and Fort, the thing in the Magic Kingdom, other than the castle that gave that park the most of its character and difference from Disneyland, was the Country Bears. They have to live at Disney World forever because they are the last real connective tissue back to the beginning and back to that story. And let's not forget, the Bears are Walt's last laugh. That story is incredibly important. The last time Walt Disney ever visited Wed Enterprises, which is now Walt Disney Imagineering, Mark showed him the sketches he had for the Bears. And those sketches, it was the last time Walt laughed, at least in that building. And Walt said goodbye to Mark, which was a thing he never said. He never said goodbye anytime he left, but he said goodbye to Mark after laughing at those bear sketches, and he never returned. It is Walt's last laugh. It is the last vestige of the Walt Disney World that was, in many cases, in a world where we have lost the original Figment. We've lost the Great Movie Ride. We lost Horizons. We've lost so much of Epcot Center, which was a defining part of Walt Disney World's character. They're like one of the last little pieces left. And it's so important they continue to be a part of the Florida parks. As much as Figment has to stay, the Country Bears have to stay. They are one and the same as far as importance to what makes Walt Disney World Walt Disney World. But I think they did a phenomenal job. Kudos to the team. Thank you for keeping the Bears alive. And thank you to everyone who made this happen, because I am overjoyed with how it turned out. And I know some people have been unhappy with it. You know, I get it. You know, I have lost things I care about, but I love the Country Bears. I think this is right. It feels right. And so maybe I think you need to look inside and, are some things just because it's about change, or is it actually about the quality of the show? Because I don't think it is. There are things like Runaway Railway eats at me. Every time I ride that ride, I just feel like this is not even close to the magic, the wonder, and the importance of the Great Movie Ride. This is a downgrade, is how I feel about that every time I walk in that building. And I am so happy I don't have to feel that every time I go to Grizzly Hall at the Magic Kingdom. I'm losing my voice here, ranting about bears. So I think that means it's probably time to end our honest review. Before we get out of here, I want to mention, obviously, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the review, hit the like button and subscribe for more great content. You could support this program and many others like it by joining our Patreon program at patreon.com/WDWNT. One cool thing we're going to do in our Discord community, which is accessed by being a WIGS member through Patreon, I'm going to ask you guys to actually nominate things for honest reviews, because we're going to start doing what we call retro honest reviews. So they could be things that are closed. They could be things that are not new necessarily, because usually when we do these, it's something new. It's an attraction that just opened. So we want to start doing these for things that aren't, and start doing this deep dive about why things are important and how we feel about it, and things like that. So that'll be something we do with Patreon. And of course, also, if you want to support us, you could shop with Carousel of Products at carouselofproducts.com. Maybe we'll have a Country Bear shirt to go with this Tower of Terror one very soon. But in the meantime, you can pick this up. Very few left at time of recording, and they're on sale for $60. But limited sizes left on this Tower of Terror 30th anniversary button-up shirt. Carouselofproducts.com or WDWNT.shop. Thanks for watching this honest review, and we hope that you'll be coming back again.